Welcome back to another First Look where we give you just a sneak peek of an upcoming game. Today we're talking about Batman the Animated Series Adventures from IDW. This is another one in their Universal Adventures system. It is a combat dice rolling game, a game that's not typically in my wheelhouse, but I've got Ryan here joining me, and I've got Ryan for one main reason. Ryan is young enough to have grown up knowing this Batman as your first Batman experience.
That's true. I was like 6 years old, I think, when the animated series came out, and I grew up loving that show. I mean, I had all the action figures, I had all like the storybooks and everything when I was a kid.
That makes me feel old.
This was my first Batman.
Which is awesome, because this is absolutely one of my favorite Batmans. In fact, I don't know if you can see on this camera here, I've got some Batman and Robin statues, a Joker statue. Keep in mind, these are not part of this game. These are in my own personal collection, but we're both huge fans of the animated series, and we're going to start there because we'll get into the Universal system in a second, but this thing takes a deep, deep dive into the animated series, and we can't tell you everything. There are some pretty cool things they've got in store for the Kickstarter, but this game goes deep. The villains in the core pack alone, which is Shadow of the Bat, we've got a scenario set up here, but we don't even have all of the components. But some of the characters that this goes into, you've got not just, of course, the Joker and the Riddler, Mr. Freeze, things like that, but it goes down a little bit deeper. We've got Man-Bat right here, obviously Penguin, and then there's going to be some more boxes that have even more characters.
Yeah, in fact, there's another box, the Arkham Asylum expansion, that's coming out as well.
Yeah, that box includes Clayface, Poison Ivy, Jervis Tech, the Ventriloquist, Maxie Zeus, which is a deep, deep cut, Killer Croc, the Clock King, Hugo Strange, Baby Doll, another really deep cut, and Lockup. Now, if you've ever watched the animated series, Lockup is a character in one single episode of the animated series. And of course, if you're not a fan of the animated series, a lot of these characters actually got their start in the animated series.
Well, that's true, like Harley Quinn, for example.
Harley Quinn, which might shock a lot of people because she's in such a mainstream character today, got her start. She was invented for Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, basically, if you're a fan of the animated series, you're going to see a lot of familiar animation styles and characters that you love from the show. But if you're just a fan of Batman in general, there's still so much to dive into with this game.
Yeah, so we'll cover off a couple more little things here that are included in all of the expansions. They've also got some story packs. One of those is Mask of the Phantasm. Again, this was a feature-length film that was released in theaters, a one-off, and they had a character created for that. So they have that, and you kind of play through a little bit of that storyline in the campaign there. And then they have the Batwoman movie character, which is a very unique character. She wasn't in the animated series at all until that movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no limit to the amount of characters that you can add into this game. And because it is part of that Universal Adventure system, it's compatible with other adventure games. So you can have characters mixed and matched across all of those different sets.
Yeah, no, so what you might be wondering is, how is this different than what they did with TMNT? And there are some pretty significant differences. One thing, just sort of in general, TMNT was meant as more of a brawler. So if you've played it at all, the scenarios have you going sort of from a point A to point B, doing a couple things, but mostly you're just surviving against all these bad guys, right? This one has a little bit more of a pressure thing going on. It feels a little bit more like a cooperative game in the traditional sense. So not only do you have to do that, you're going through fighting all the bad guys, defending and surviving against the bad guys, but for instance, one of the scenarios takes place in the Nothing to Fear episode of Batman the Animated Series. It was like the third episode of the show, where Scarecrow is there, and it was a bank heist, and he was using his fear toxin. So in this scenario, you have to fight the bad guys. Scarecrow is using his fear toxin on people. There's a fire, so you have to go around putting out the fire in a different way. The fear toxin can actually change these bystander characters into effectively bad guys that are going to be attacking you, but you can't attack them back. You have to use antidote on them. So, as you can imagine, there's all these different variables you have to take care of. So in a cooperative mode, I'll be like, you go take care of the fire, I'm gonna get these guys. There's a number of different variables you have to handle.
Yeah, and that's just one scenario out of over a dozen or so scenarios.
Yeah, they've got, I think, 24 around scenarios. And the other cool thing about this game is it's built with flexibility in mind. A couple cool things that they told me were, ultimately, you can even play with the villains as heroes in a way. A lot of these characters come with multiple cards. There's cards for the heroes for both competitive and cooperative mode. Same thing with the villains. The villains can actually be used in the game, and you can kind of pretty much, after you've played all the scenarios, it has so much flexibility that you can kind of homebrew some of your own scenarios just by taking some tiles out of the box, putting them together, putting a villain out there, and going.
Yeah, and these scenarios, some of them can last just one game. Some of them can actually carry over through multiple games as well.
Yeah, a couple more things I want to talk about for sure, because these are two very specific additions. One of them is the Commander class, Jim Gordon. I'll let you talk about that in a second. But first, I want to talk about the Clayface mode. This comes with the Arkham Asylum expansion and Clayface, of course. But there's a mode that's kind of a hidden traitor mode in this game. So you can play any of the scenarios like you normally would, but everyone's handed cards out at the beginning of the game, and someone gets a Clayface card. Now, they could be playing as Batman, but secretly, they are Clayface just appearing like Batman. So at any point in the game or at some point in the scenario, they can reveal that they're Clayface and have a different objective, basically trying to mix in throughout the scenario long enough to where they want to reveal it and can potentially steal the win from the rest of the people at the table.
That sounds like a fun mode.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did mention Gordon, and there's definitely some advancements they've made to that system, and the Commander class is one of them. Gordon is not as strong of a hero as any other hero you might be familiar with in the game, but he does have basically assistants that come with him in the form of beat cops. And these beat cops can actually be upgraded. You can have your beat cops, you can have your SWAT team, you can even have Bullock and Montoya, who are wildly popular characters. And you're going to be doing that by manipulating your deck of cards. Every character has a deck of cards of which you're going to choose a few of them. And Jim Gordon has the option to swap out some of those cards for these upgrades to his beat cops. In addition, characters that have utility belts like Batman can swap out cards from their deck to bring in gadgets as well.
Yeah, the gadgets are really cool. They have more uses because you can swap out one skill card. And for instance, Batman gets 4. So I can get rid of one of those skill cards and get up to 4 different gadgets to use. Obviously, the gadgets may not be as strong as an individual skill, but it might give you a little bit more flexibility and variety. So when you're attacking or sort of approaching any given scenario, you can kind of talk about this because, for instance, right now we've got Batgirl, Batman, Robin as the standard heroes along with Commissioner Gordon. These guys have utility belts so they can use the gadgets. Gordon doesn't, but like you said, he can upgrade these characters, which is really, really cool. One other thing I want to mention, these are 4 of the 5 heroes in the base game, the box that you'll get. It also comes with Catwoman. Catwoman can be played as a hero because, as you know, Catwoman kind of rides a fine line there. Sometimes she plays the hero, sometimes she doesn't, and she can also be used as a villain in the game.
In addition, there's 8 villain characters that you can play with, and you can play with these villains in any mode, including Dark Knight mode, which is actually a solo mode, so you solo players will be happy. I'm happy because Mr. Freeze is one of those 8 villains, and he is my all-time favorite animated series villain. So there are a ton of scenarios, a ton of gameplay modes, and just a ton of fan service content.
Yeah, like we've said, we just have a small sampling here on the table. We don't even have the expansions or either the story expansions, just the core box here. There is a lot for both fans of the series and fans of this system.
Yeah, so that is Batman the Animated Series Adventures. The game is coming to Kickstarter on February 18th, so take a look at that Kickstarter page and see what all the final components are and all the goodies and surprises they have in store for you that we couldn't talk about. And please come back here, leave some comments, ask us any questions you have. And as always, thank you for liking, subscribing, and following us at MVM, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.